Hi boys and girls, welcome back to Children's Church Online. We're spending a few months finding out the answers to this question. Who does God say I am? Today, you'll discover that we each have a purpose. We'll find out about how a queen found her purpose. Now, think about that, a queen. Where does a queen live? A palace? Yes. What do you think it would be like to live in a palace? What would be the best part of living in a palace? I think for me, if I lived in a palace, that must mean that I'm pretty wealthy, and the best part would be that somebody else is cleaning it and not me. What would the best part be for you? Talk about that for a moment. We don't have to live in a palace to have a purpose. We each have a purpose. But for Esther, we'll see how living in a palace was an important part of God's specific purpose for her. Let's dig into the Bible and find out more. The Bible can help show us God's plan for how we should live, which is part of our purpose. Today, we're finding out that each one of us have a purpose. That means God made you to do something good. He made you special, and He wants to use you to do important things. What's something special about you? Maybe you're someone who's generous, and God uses your generosity to help others. Or maybe you're somebody who's funny, and God uses you to make people laugh or to smile. The Bible gives us an example of how God had a special purpose for one woman. There was a place called Persia that had a king named Xerxes. King Xerxes needed a new queen. So all the young women gathered together. So at your home with your family, I want everybody to gather together, waiting for the king to choose his new queen. Out of all the women in the land, King Xerxes chose Esther. He didn't know it, but Esther was a Jewish woman, one of God's people. Now, if you're a boy, I want you to take a minute and pretend to place a crown on someone's head. And if you're a girl, I want you to pretend that you are receiving the crown on your head. And then we'll continue with our story about Queen Esther. Esther was God's friend, and God had a plan to use her to help all His people. Like He did for Esther, God has a plan to use you to do good things too, because each one of us have a purpose. Let's look at the first purpose God had for Queen Esther. Here's what happened. Esther had a cousin, and her cousin's name was Mordecai. And Mordecai used to sit outside the palace. And one day, he heard an important message. So he sent a message to Queen Esther. And I'm going to pass that message to you. So I want you to look carefully at my mouth, and I'm going to send you the message. Are you ready? Did you get the message? No? Let's try again. Someone wants to hurt the king. Now did you get the message? Okay, one more time. Someone wants to hurt the king. So, there's cousin Mordecai sitting outside of the palace, and he hears this. So he sends that message to Queen Esther. That's not good news. Good thing Esther got the message from Mordecai. That helped keep the king safe. God used both Esther and Mordecai to save the king. We each have a purpose, and God had an important purpose for both Esther and her cousin Mordecai. But that wasn't the only trouble during that time. Mordecai heard another message, and he just had to get it to Esther. Are you ready for the next message? Okay, watch my mouth. Did you get it? Try again. Now did you get the message? All right, one more time. God's people are in danger. Now, did you get the message? That's more bad news, right? But Mordecai also knew that God had a purpose for Esther to be the one to save God's people. In our Bible, in the book of Esther, chapter 4, verses 13 and 14 say, "He sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this." You see, God had a specific reason why he wanted Esther to be queen during this time. Esther had to be careful because the man who actually wanted to hurt God's people was a friend of the king. This man's name was Haman. And Haman had even convinced the king it was a good idea to hurt God's people. Haman told the king God's people were bad, and the king believed it. But remember, the king didn't know his very own queen was one of God's people. Esther had to work very quickly. In this kingdom, there was a rule that no one could talk to the king unless he welcomed them. And here is how he showed someone was welcome. He would have a special tool. Now, I'm just using a pool noodle, but pretend that this is a special long-staffed tool. It's called a scepter. And he would hold it out like this to show that someone could come in. So take your arm and reach out and pretend you're the king and you're saying, okay, you can come in. So here's Esther. Remember, she's got this very important message to tell the king that this mean man Haman wants to hurt God's people, including her. So when Esther came to the door, she looked in and waited. And then the king held out his scepter to welcome Esther. Esther thought it best to ask the king to help her people after she spent some time with the king. So she asked the king if she could have a dinner for him and his friends. So I'm going to pause our story and we're going to pretend that we are helping to plan this banquet or dinner that Esther wants to have so that she can share her important message with the king. So if you'd like to do this with me, you're going to need a piece of paper and either some crayons, colored pencils, or markers to draw with. So pause the video for a minute and get those things if you want to do this with me. Okay, are you all ready to draw with me? So remember, we're preparing a banquet for the king, and I'm going to suggest that we prepare spaghetti. Italian food is really good for a banquet, and so I'm going to teach you how to draw a plate of spaghetti, okay? So the first thing we need to do is have a couple meatballs, right? Because what's spaghetti without meatballs? So there's one meatball, just a circle, okay? And then here's the second meatball. All right, so we got a couple meatballs here. And now we're going to draw some arcs down from the meatballs like this, okay? And then a very light squiggle line across to connect them like that. Okay, so this is going to be our noodles. But before we get to that, let's put this spaghetti on a plate. So come up a little bit and you wrap around like that. And now we've got that big blob of noodles and spaghetti sitting on a plate. So we need lots of sauce because everybody likes sauce. So to make sauce, you start maybe right there-ish. And again, you're just gonna make whatever squiggle lines you like. Or maybe if you only like a little bit of sauce, you just put a little bit up by the meatballs. Or if you like a lot, you could bring it way down here, however you like it, okay? And then of course, the important part is noodles, right? So to draw the noodles, we're going to just draw a bunch of arced lines. Let me show you what I mean. If I start over in this corner, I just do it like this, okay? And then maybe I'll flip and go like this. Make a couple lines this way. See how that works? And then maybe down like this. You just want them ever so slightly arced. And they don't have to be perfect in size. But you'll just keep going across your spaghetti. Because you know whenever your spaghetti noodles are on your plate, they're all just kind of in a big heap. So maybe a couple more that way. Maybe I'll start some over this way. And up here we need some. Now obviously, the most important part will come at the end, right? And do you know what that is? Did you say coloring your picture? Of course, because that's what's going to bring it to life. Draw a couple this way. Whoop. There's a couple big long noodles. And then a couple short ones buried under here. And maybe a couple this way. Okay? There. So there is my spaghetti and meatballs. And you can make it a silly plate of spaghetti and meatballs by giving your meatballs a face. If you want to. You don't have to. You can make it more realistic if you want. You can color in your sauce. You can design your plate. You could make it a fancy plate, or you could just color it in your favorite color plate, whatever you want to do, right? So there you have your fancy plate of spaghetti and meatballs to serve to the king. Now that we've got our spaghetti, right? At the first dinner, the king said, "What do you need help with, Esther?" But she was still feeling a little nervous to share the message that she had gotten. So she asked the king if they could have a special dinner the next night. She told the king, "I'll tell you what I need at tomorrow night's dinner." So again, they had to serve a special banquet. So if you'd like to draw some more food with me, get another sheet of paper and get your coloring tools ready. This time, I'm going to teach you how to draw a taco. We're going to make this banquet be a Mexican night. So get your coloring tools ready and I'm going to show you how to make a taco. So the first thing you're going to do is draw a line straight across the bottom, like this. And then starting at one end, you're going to go up and make a hump, but don't connect it on the other side. You're going to leave it like that. So you've got like this little wanger piece out here to the side and a hole right there, okay? And then what you're going to do is take this end and wrap it up and around and connect it like this, okay? Now that is actually going to be our taco shell. So in your taco, you're probably going to want some taco meat, some beef. And I don't know about you, but whenever I make tacos, the beef tends to be like all crinkled up and goofy, odd shapes, right? So we'll put some beef in this taco. And then, oh, I forgot my red marker because I like tomatoes. So if you like some tomatoes, let's get some tomatoes in there. So I think those are yummy. Put one up here, maybe one over here, right? And then of course lettuce. We've got to have some iceberg lettuce in there. And again, it's kind of like a crinkly shape, right? Like, so get some lettuce on your taco. And in my house, sometimes we put black olives. Are you a black olive person? So if you want a couple black olives in there. Now you know the best part's coming up at the end, right? What's the last thing you put on your taco? Oh, maybe second to last thing. Cheese, right? You gotta have some cheddar cheese, some Mexican cheese. So, I don't know, these guys are just like little stick pieces, kind of sticking up every which way, all over, right? Cheese, yummy. Now, what would be the last thing you would put on your taco? Probably something I can't really draw too well. Did you say sour cream? Yeah, I love sour cream too. But sour cream is white, and I don't know that it would show up real well on my white paper. So there is your taco. And again, if you want to get fancy, you can give him a face. Give him a fun face today. We'll give him a fun tongue hanging out, right? So there is our fun drawing of our taco, all ready for our Mexican banquet for the king. So we're all ready for our Mexican banquet on night 2, right? At the second dinner, Esther told the king, "Someone wants to hurt me and all of God's people." The king was very upset and asked who wanted to hurt them. When Esther told the king that it was actually his friend Haman, the king sent Haman away from the castle, never to return, and punished him. So Esther and all God's people were safe. They threw a party. God used Esther for a purpose, and we each have a purpose. God's purpose for us can be small or big. It might change. We might have a purpose now, but a different purpose when we're teenagers or adults. God has a plan to use us in all kinds of ways. Let's think of ways kids can have a purpose. Maybe you bring smiles to the faces in your family when you water flowers, feed a pet, or help with the cooking. Or maybe you can encourage other people at school and help them when they're confused about doing their schoolwork. Maybe your purpose is to show God's love to other people on your soccer team. What is a good purpose for you right now? God has a purpose for you right now. We each have a purpose, like Esther did. This week, let's look for ways God can use us to do good things. Today we're learning that we each have a purpose. But what if you're not sure what your purpose is? Well, we're going to watch a video called What's the Purpose? And get some practice figuring out the purpose of some very strange items. See how many you can get right.
Welcome to the Totally Kid Show, the show where we explore God's amazing world. From alpacas to bass guitars, we're gonna check it out.
Today we're gonna find out the purpose of some old tools that we found in the workshop. Believe it or not, most of these tools are over 100 years old.
And our friend Bob is a tool expert, and he's gonna help us out.
Bob?
Bob?
Where's Bob?
Bob!
Bob!
Oh, sorry kids. I got a little lost back there. What are we looking at today?
We found this in the workshop. What is it?
Well,
I bet it's a handle of some sort. What do you think? Talk to a friend and guess what the purpose of this tool is. Time's up. Let's see if you're right. Bob, can you tell us what this tool does?
Sure. Well, before there was electricity, nobody used electric drills. So you would put a bit in this, tighten it up, and then you would hold it in place, and then you would drill something.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work. I'm glad we have electric drills now.
Yeah, electric drills are a lot easier, but before electricity, tools like this served an important purpose. Gunner, will you grab that board over there? I'll show you how it works.
Yeah.
Put that right there on the table.
Okay.
Yeah. And you just hold this in place and turn. Cool, right?
Yeah. What's this one?
I bet you it's some sort of dentist tool. What's your guess? What's the purpose of this one? Time's up. Bob, what is the purpose of this one?
Well, this tool is used to melt metal, like iron. So you'd put the iron in this part and hold it over a flame until the metal melted. Then you would pour it into a mold. This pointy end is used to smooth out the metal and scrape off any excess.
But this is made out of metal. Wouldn't it melt too?
That's a good question, Gunner. This tool is made of a harder metal, so it won't melt.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
Oh, I know. I bet you this was a comb for someone who only had 3 hairs.
Not exactly.
You've got 20 seconds. Guess the purpose. Time's up. And the answer is a bug killer.
Not quite. This is called a saw rest. Bethany, can you grab that saw over there? If you look at a saw, it has all these pointy things on it. Those are called teeth. The saw rest is used to make sure that those teeth are pointed in the right direction so you can cut through wood easily.
Wow, that sounds like an important purpose. So without this saw rest, your saw could get too dull to keep cutting.
That's right, this tool may not look like much, but it's very important to keep the saw in the right shape.
Okay. Don't tell me. This is a grabber thingy. Like if the tissue box is a little out of reach?
Nope, nice try. Maybe you want to let your audience give it a try?
Sounds good. Go for it. Time's up. Bob, can you help us out here?
Sure. This is called a micrometer. It's kind of like a ruler. It's used to measure tiny things. So what you do is you place what you want to measure inside. So stick your finger in there. And it tells you how many micrometers that is.
What's a micrometer?
That's a good question. Well, a meter is about 3 feet, and a micrometer is 1/1,000,000th of a meter.
1/1,000,000th? Why would anyone want to measure that?
Well, when you're working on very small projects, you want to make sure that you have very accurate measurements. Well, I've got one more tool here. Can you guys guess what this one is?
Is it a hammer of some sort?
No, I think it's a pin.
Well, nice try, but you're both wrong. Let's see if your audience can guess what it is.
What is it?
This is a screwdriver.
A screwdriver?
Yes. And not only does it have a screwdriver head, it also has a saw blade and also a really tiny wrench.
So this tool has a lot of purposes.
It really does.
Well, I learned about tools I didn't even know existed. Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome.
Join us next time on the Totally Kids Show. Who knows where we'll be next?
Bye!
Bye.
Which items stumped you the most? Did you know any of those things? I'll be honest, I didn't know any of them. The first one, I sort of thought it was some sort of drilling type mechanism, but I really wasn't sure. Esther spent most of her life just being a normal person. I bet she was surprised to find out her purpose was to be a queen and save a bunch of people. God can do anything through you because we each have a purpose. So, to end our time together today, I would like you to be thinking about these things, how God uses every part of our lives for His purpose. I want you to touch your mouth and say, God, use our mouth to speak with love. Hold out your hand and say, God, use my hand to serve you. I want you to make your fingers look like binoculars that you're looking through and say, God, use my eyes to see people the way you see them. And then I want you to cup your ears. And I want you to say, God, use our ears to listen for people in need. And the last thing I want you to do is stand up and walk in place and say, God, use my feet to go where you want me to go. Thank you for joining me today in Children's Church Online. I'll see you next week.